The morning sun cast long shadows across Seoul Spaceport as Ji-won Kim adjusted her white lab coat for the 100th time. Her hands shook slightly as she checked her tablet again. Today was the day humanity would meet its first alien visitors. After months of radio signals and careful negotiations, the Galactic Confederation had finally agreed to visit Earth. Dr. Kim, the ship is approaching. Tae-hoon Park stepped beside her, his military uniform crisp and perfect. As Earth's strategic advisor, he had spent weeks preparing for this moment. "Are you ready?" Ji-won nodded, though her stomach felt like it was full of butterflies. Behind them, Sun Mi-lee finished testing the translation equipment one more time. The young linguist had learned 3 alien languages in just 2 months, a feat that impressed even the aliens themselves. "Translation systems are working perfectly," Sun-mi reported. "We should be able to understand them clearly." High above them, a shadow fell across the spaceport. The alien ship was massive, easily 10 times larger than Earth's biggest spacecraft. It moved without sound, floating down like a gentle giant. The hull was smooth and silver, with strange blue lights that pulsed in patterns no human could understand. Hundreds of people had gathered to watch this historic moment. News crews from every country pointed their cameras at the sky. Children pressed their faces against the viewing barriers while their parents held them tight. The ship touched down with barely a whisper. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a section of the hull simply faded away, creating an opening where none had existed before. 3 figures emerged from the ship. They were tall, much taller than humans, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the sunlight. Their faces were narrow and elegant, with large silver eyes that held ancient wisdom. They wore flowing robes that seemed to change color as they moved. The leader stepped forward. When he spoke, his voice was deep and musical, but the translation device made his words clear in perfect Korean and English. "Greetings, people of Earth. I am Ambassador Veltharion of the Altarian species. We come in peace and friendship to welcome you into the Galactic Confederation." Ji-won stepped forward, her heart pounding. This was it. Humanity's first words to another species. "Welcome to Earth, Ambassador Veltharion. I am Dr. Ji-won Kim, representing all of humanity. We are honored by your visit." Veltharion's silver eyes studied her carefully. For just a moment, something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, or confusion, but it was gone so quickly that Ji-won almost missed it. "You have interesting energy patterns," Veltharion said, tilting his head slightly. "Most unusual for a developing species." "Energy patterns?" Tae-hoon asked, stepping closer. His soldier instincts were alert to any possible threat. "All living beings produce energy signatures," one of Veltharion's companions explained. "Yours are quite different from what we expected. More complex. More intense." Sun-mi frowned as she listened through her headphones. "Ambassador, are you saying we're different from other species you've encountered?" Veltharion exchanged glances with his companions. They seemed to have a silent conversation before he answered. "Every species is unique, of course. Your patterns are simply more varied than most. It is likely nothing important." But Ji-won caught the way he said it, like he was trying to convince himself as much as them. The next few hours passed in a blur of ceremonies and presentations. The aliens showed humanity examples of galactic technology, devices that could heal any injury, ships that traveled between stars in days instead of years, and tools that could create matter from pure energy. In return, humans shared their art, music, and culture. The aliens seemed genuinely impressed by human creativity, though they kept making strange comments about humanity's untapped potential. During a break in the formal proceedings, Ji-won found herself alone with Veltharion in a quiet corner of the spaceport. "Ambassador, may I ask you something directly?" Veltharion nodded, his silver eyes focusing on her with surprising intensity. "You keep mentioning our energy patterns and potential. Is there something you're not telling us?" The alien ambassador was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer, more careful. "Dr. Kim, in the 5,000 years of the Confederation's existence, we have encountered over 800 different species. Each has joined us at roughly the same level of development. They learn our technology, adapt to our ways, and find their place in galactic society. And humans are different. Your species shows readings we have never seen before. Your brain activity during stress creates patterns that our instruments cannot fully measure. Some of your people solve problems in ways that should be impossible with your current technology." Ji-won felt a chill run down her spine. What does that mean? Perhaps nothing, Veltharion said, but his voice carried doubt. Or perhaps everything. There are legends in the galaxy, Dr. Kim. Stories of a species that once guided the development of all life among the stars. They were called the Architects. What happened to them? They vanished. 50,000 years ago, they simply disappeared from the galaxy. Some say they transcended physical existence. Others believe they were destroyed by their own power. But before they left, they seeded countless worlds with life. The ambassador looked directly into Jiwan's eyes. The energy patterns we're reading from humans match theoretical models of what the Architects might have been like. Jiwan's mouth went dry. Are you saying we might be related to these Architects? I am saying that your species bears watching. The Confederation has protocols for dealing with descendants of the Architects, should they ever return. What kind of protocols? Veltharion was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his diplomatic mask was firmly in place. Let us focus on the present, Dr. Kim. Humanity has much to learn about galactic society. We will provide teachers and guides to help your people adapt. But as he walked away, Jiwan heard him whisper something into a communication device in his own language. Sunmi, who was listening through her translation equipment, turned pale. What did he say? Jiwan asked. Sunmi looked around to make sure no one else could hear them. He said, begin Phase 1 monitoring. The seeded ones have awakened. Recommend immediate containment protocols pending council decision. That evening, as the alien ship prepared to depart, Veltharion stood at his ship's observation deck looking down at Earth. His aide approached with a data pad. Ambassador, the preliminary scans are complete. The energy readings are definitely consistent with Architect genetics, but the humans seem completely unaware of their nature. Veltharion nodded slowly. That may be the most terrifying thing about them. A species with the potential to reshape reality itself, and they have no idea what they truly are. Should we inform the Council immediately? Yes, and recommend that all human integration be monitored closely. If they begin to awaken to their true nature before we understand how to control the situation. The ambassador didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Both aliens knew the stories of what the Architects had been capable of before they vanished. The idea of such power in the hands of a species that didn't even know they possessed it was enough to make even the most advanced civilizations tremble. As the alien ship lifted off into the night sky, carrying its disturbing news to the stars, the humans below continued their celebrations. They had no idea that their joyful first contact had just triggered the biggest crisis the galaxy had seen in 50,000 years. In her apartment that night, Jiwan stared out her window at the stars and wondered what they had really gotten themselves into. 3 months after first contact, Luna Station buzzed with activity. The massive space facility orbited Earth's moon, serving as humanity's first step into galactic society. Inside its gleaming corridors, humans from every nation trained alongside alien instructors, learning the ways of the Confederation. Minho Cho wiped sweat from his forehead as he entered the physical training chamber. The former Korean Special Forces soldier had volunteered for Confederation security training, hoping to protect humanity's interests among the stars. What he hadn't expected was how different alien training would be. Today we test your strength limits, announced Instructor Zefkorin, a reptilian creature with green scales and 4 arms. His species, the Velkari, were known throughout the galaxy as excellent trainers. This metal bar is made from Confederation standard alloy. No known species can bend it with bare hands. Zefkorin held up a silver rod about as thick as a human thumb. Other trainees from various species had already tried and failed to even scratch its surface. There was a Altarian with pale blue skin, 2 furry creatures called Mordani, and a crystalline being whose name Minho couldn't pronounce. Human candidate Minho Cho, please step forward. Minho approached the testing station. He took the metal rod in his hands, feeling its weight. It was surprisingly light but felt incredibly hard. He applied pressure slowly, testing its resistance. The rod didn't move. Minho frowned and tried again, this time putting more force behind his grip. Still nothing. Frustration began to build in his chest. He had always been strong, even among Special Forces soldiers. The idea that he couldn't at least make a dent bothered him more than it should have. It's impossible, human, said the Altarian trainee. Even our strongest warriors cannot affect this material. Something inside Minho snapped. Without thinking, he gripped the rod with both hands and squeezed with everything he had. channeling years of training and determination into his hands. The metal bar bent in half with a sharp crack. The training chamber fell completely silent. Every eye in the room stared at the twisted metal in Minho's hands. The rod, which had resisted the efforts of dozens of species, was now shaped like the letter V. "That's impossible," whispered the Altarian. Instructor Zefkorin slowly approached Minho, his 4 eyes wide with disbelief. He took the bent rod and examined it carefully. "In 300 years of training, I have never seen this. How did you do this?" Minho stared at his own hands. "I don't know. I just got angry and squeezed. It felt like the right thing to do." "The right thing to do?" Zefkorin repeated. "What does that mean?" "I can't explain it," Minho said honestly. "It was like something inside me knew exactly how much pressure to apply and where to apply it. Like my body understood the metal better than my mind did." Across the station in the science laboratories, Yuna Han was having her own strange experience. The young astrophysicist had been struggling with Confederation energy equations for weeks. The mathematical concepts were far beyond anything taught on Earth, requiring an understanding of 11 different dimensions and energy states that human science had never discovered. "Dr. Han, these calculations take most species several years to master," said her instructor, a floating jellyfish-like creature called Professor Nemthara. "Do not feel bad if you cannot grasp them immediately." Yuna stared at the holographic display showing the complex equation. Numbers and symbols floated in 3-dimensional space, connected by lines of light that showed their relationships to each other. It looked like chaos to most human eyes, but as Yuna watched, something clicked. The chaos suddenly became a pattern. The floating symbols weren't random at all. They were parts of a larger structure, like pieces of a puzzle that she could suddenly see how to put together. Her hands moved across the control interface without conscious thought, manipulating the equation at speeds that should have been impossible. "Dr. Han, what are you doing?" Professor Nemthara's voice carried alarm. "Solving it," Yuna replied, her eyes never leaving the display. "The pattern is so clear. How do other species not see this?" In less than 5 minutes, she had restructured the entire equation. The holographic display pulsed bright green, indicating a correct solution. But that wasn't the amazing part. The amazing part was that she had found 3 additional solutions that created more efficient energy outputs than the original. Professor Nemthara floated closer to the display, her tentacles twitching with excitement or fear. "This is impossible. These calculations require quantum intuition that takes decades to develop. And these additional solutions, we have never seen mathematics like this." "It just made sense," Yuna said, finally looking away from the display, like the numbers were telling me what they wanted to become. Word of both incidents spread quickly through Luna Station. By evening, every instructor was talking about the strange human abilities. In the staff meeting room, Instructor Zefkorin presented his report to the station commander. "Commander, we have a problem," Zefkorin began. "The humans are not performing within expected parameters." Commander Thexelar, a tall insect-like being with compound eyes, clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "Explain." Human trainee Minho Cho bent a Confederation standard alloy rod. Human scientist Yuna Han solved advanced energy equations in minutes that should take years to understand. Both claim they simply knew what to do. Instinct? More than instinct. Minho seemed to understand the molecular structure of the alloy without any training in material science. Yuna displayed quantum mathematical intuition that we have only seen in species that have evolved for millions of years in high-energy environments. The commander's compound eyes focused on different screens showing data about human performance. "What do the brain scans show?" "That's the most disturbing part," Zefkorin admitted. "During these events, human brain activity spikes to levels we've never recorded in any species. The pattern isn't random. It's organized, purposeful, like their minds are accessing information that shouldn't exist in their memories." Commander Thexelar was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke. "Have you reviewed the classified files about the architects?" "Yes, Commander." "The theoretical brain patterns match almost perfectly. How many other humans are showing these signs?" 12 so far, out of the 50 in training. "But Commander, I don't think they realize what they're doing. They seem genuinely surprised by their own abilities." That night, as humans slept in their quarters, Commander Thexelar sent an encrypted message to Confederation High Command. The message was short but carried enormous implications. Human Monitoring Report, Day 87. Subjects displaying increasing signs of architect-level abilities. Patterns suggest genetic memory activation under stress conditions. Subjects remain unaware of significance. Recommend immediate escalation to Alpha priority. We may be witnessing the return of the seated ones. In his quarters, Minho stared at his hands in the darkness. The bent metal rod sat on his desk, proof that something inside him was different. He thought about the moment when he had gripped the rod. For just an instant, he had felt something vast and ancient stirring in the back of his mind, like a sleeping giant beginning to wake up. Down the hall, Yuna lay in her bed, her mind still buzzing with mathematical possibilities. The equations she had solved seemed simple now, like children's puzzles. She could see connections between energy states and dimensional mathematics that her professors claimed were impossible. It was as if someone had turned on a light in a room she hadn't known was dark. Neither of them knew that their small demonstrations had sent shockwaves through the highest levels of galactic government. Neither understood that they were part of something that had been sleeping in human genetics for 50,000 years, waiting for the right moment to awaken. As Luna Station continued its orbit around Earth's moon, the humans inside slept peacefully, unaware that they had just taken the first steps toward becoming something that would either save the galaxy or destroy it completely. The only question was whether anyone would be able to control what was coming next. The Galactic Archive on Centauri Prime was the largest library in known space. Its crystal towers stretched kilometers into the sky, each one containing the collected knowledge of hundreds of civilizations. For the past month, Do-hyun Ryu had been wandering through its endless halls, researching galactic history for Earth's cultural database. The young historian had expected to find fascinating stories about alien civilizations. What he hadn't expected was to keep finding references to his own species in documents that were older than human civilization itself. Archkeeper Mordeth. "I need access to the restricted historical files," Do-hyun said as he approached the ancient librarian's desk. Mordeth was old even by the standards of his species, the eternal scribes. His body was made of living stone that had been growing and changing for over 10,000 years. Glowing symbols moved across his rocky surface like slow, patient thoughts. "Young human, those files are restricted for good reason. Some knowledge is dangerous to know. I'm finding references to something called the Seated Ones in documents from different civilizations across the galaxy. Every time I try to learn more, the information is classified." Do-hyun placed his data tablet on the desk, showing highlighted passages from dozens of different sources. Mordeth's stone face remained expressionless, but the symbols on his skin began moving faster. "Where did you find these references?" "Everywhere," Do-hyun replied. Trade records from the Altarian Empire mention watching for signs of the Seated Ones. Military documents from the Velkari refer to architect protocol warnings. Even religious texts from the Mordani talk about those who shape the stars. The Archkeeper was quiet for a long time. The symbols on his skin swirled in complex patterns that Do-hyun had learned meant deep thought. "Human researcher, why do you think these files are restricted?" "Because whatever happened with the Seated Ones or architects scared the entire galaxy enough to classify it for thousands of years." Mordeth's rocky fingers drummed against his desk. "Your species shows unusual curiosity about dangerous topics." "My species?" Do-hyun leaned forward. "Are humans connected to this somehow?" Before Mordeth could answer, an alarm began ringing through the archive. Emergency lights flashed as an announcement echoed through the crystal halls. "All personnel report to emergency stations. Unauthorized activation detected in the architect vault." Mordeth's stone body shifted with movements that seemed almost like panic. "This should not be possible. Nothing has activated those systems for 50,000 years." "What's the architect vault?" Do-hyun asked, but the Archkeeper was already moving, his heavy stone feet carrying him surprisingly quickly toward the restricted levels. Do-hyun followed, his historian instincts telling him this was connected to his research. Deep in the archive's most secure level, they found chaos. Scientists and technicians from a dozen different species stood around a massive chamber, filled with crystalline devices that pulsed with blue light. At the center of it all stood Sarah Im, a Korean quantum physicist who had been studying faster-than-light travel. "Dr. Im, step away from the device immediately," commanded the head of archive security, a tall Altarian with multiple arms. "I can't," Sarah replied, her voice filled with wonder. "It won't let me go." She stood before a pillar of crystal that rose from the floor like a frozen tree. Her hands were pressed against its surface, and where she touched, waves of light rippled through the entire structure. Holographic star maps appeared in the air around her, showing systems and worlds that weren't in any galactic database. "How long has she been like this?" Mordeth asked the security chief. 15 minutes. She was examining the dormant architect technology for her research when it suddenly activated. "We've never seen anything like this." Sarah's eyes were closed, but she was speaking in a steady stream. "I can see them. The pathways between stars. The worlds they touched. So many worlds, seeded with life waiting for the right time to awaken." "What is she talking about?" Dohyun whispered. Mordeth's stone face turned toward him. "She is accessing architect memory crystals. Technology that has been dead since before your son was born. Technology that should only respond to those who built it. And who built it? The ones your people call the architects. The ones we call the seeded ones. The species that guided the development of all life in this galaxy before they vanished." Sarah's voice grew stronger. "They didn't vanish. They're still here. They've always been here, sleeping, waiting. The children of Earth carry their memory in every cell." The implications hit Dohyun like a physical blow. "Humans, we're descendants of the architects." "More than descendants," Mordeth said quietly. "According to the restricted files, you are the architects, reborn into mortal form with your memories locked away." The star maps around Sarah began changing, showing the movement of something through space over thousands of years. They seeded Earth last when they knew their time of physical existence was ending. They chose to be reborn as humans, to experience mortality again, to remember what it meant to be limited. "Why?" demanded the security chief. "Why would godlike beings choose to become mortal?" Sarah's eyes opened, but they glowed with the same blue light as the crystal. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that made everyone in the room feel ancient sadness. Because unlimited power without understanding destroys everything it touches. They had grown too far from their origins. They could reshape reality with a thought, but they had forgotten why anything mattered. So they chose to begin again, to grow up from mortality and hopefully become worthy of their power. "What changed?" Dohyun asked. "Why are humans starting to show abilities now?" The glow faded from Sarah's eyes and she stumbled backward from the crystal. The star maps disappeared, and the ancient technology went dormant again. But before it shut down completely, the crystal pulsed once with brilliant light, and everyone in the room felt something shift in their minds. A single thought, clear and terrifying, echoed in their consciousness. "The children are beginning to remember." Hours later, in an emergency session of the Galactic Council, representatives from every major species gathered in the Great Assembly Hall. The mood was tense as Archkeeper Mordeth presented his report. "Council members, we can no longer deny what we have suspected for months. The human species are the reincarnated architects, and they are beginning to awaken to their true nature." Panic erupted among the assembled delegates. Voices rose in fear and anger as species that had lived in peace for millennia suddenly faced the return of their creators. "What does this mean for the galaxy?" asked the Altarian representative. "It means," Mordeth replied, his ancient voice carrying the weight of eons, "that we are about to discover whether the architects learned wisdom during their time as mortals, or whether we are all doomed to serve beings who could unmake reality itself on a whim." In her quarters on Centauri Prime, Sarah stared at her hands. She could still feel the echo of vast knowledge, like memories that belonged to someone else. She understood now why the galaxy feared humans. She had seen for just a moment what her species had once been capable of. The terrifying part wasn't the power itself. It was how natural it had felt to have it. Back on Earth, Ji-won Kim received an encrypted message from the Galactic Council. As she read it, her face went pale. The message was short but clear. "Dr. Kim, we need to talk. The situation has changed dramatically. Humanity must be told the truth about what they are before they discover it themselves. The galaxy's survival may depend on how they handle this knowledge." As night fell across Earth, billions of humans went about their normal lives, unaware that they were the descendants of gods who had chosen to forget their own divinity. But in the depths of their DNA, ancient memories were beginning to stir. The awakening had begun, and nothing would ever be the same again. Kyungmin Bak had been fixing the engine core of the Confederation ship Starlight when it happened. One moment he was reaching for a wrench in his toolbox. The next moment his hand passed straight through the solid metal wall like it wasn't there at all. He stared at his hand in shock. The wall was definitely solid. He could see it, touch it with his other hand, even knock on it. But when he tried again, his right hand slipped through the metal as easily as moving through water. "What in the stars?" he whispered, pulling his hand back quickly. The other engineers in the engine room hadn't noticed anything strange. They continued working on their repairs while Kyung-min stood frozen, staring at the wall that his hand had just passed through. He tried again, this time more carefully. As his fingers approached the metal, he felt a strange tingling sensation. Then his hand was inside the wall again, moving through solid matter like it was empty space. "Engineer back, is there a problem?" asked his supervisor, a furry Mordani named Griktar. "No problem," Kyung-min lied, quickly pulling his hand back. "Just checking the internal components." But there was definitely a problem. As the day went on, the strange ability grew stronger. By evening, Kyung-min could push his entire arm through solid objects if he concentrated. The metal didn't disappear or change. Somehow his body was changing instead. 3 ships away from Kyung-min, Medical Officer Harry Song was experiencing her own impossible moment. She had been treating a Velkari patient who suffered from stone lung disease, a condition that was always fatal for his species. The patient, a young engineer named Velton, had been getting worse every day despite all available treatments. "I'm sorry," Harry had told him earlier that week. "There's nothing more we can do. You have maybe 10 days left." But as she checked on Velton that morning, something inside her rebelled against that fate. She placed her hands on his chest to listen to his breathing, and suddenly felt a warm energy flowing from her palms into his body. "Dr. Song, what are you doing?" Velton asked, his voice weak. "I don't know," she admitted, but she didn't pull her hands away. The warm feeling was getting stronger, and somehow she knew it was helping. When she finally stepped back, Velton's breathing had improved dramatically. His color was better, and the pain that had been twisting his features was gone. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Different," he said, sitting up more easily than he had in weeks. "Better, much better." Harry ran every test she could think of. The results were impossible. The stone lung disease, which had been slowly turning Velton's lungs into useless rock, was gone. Not improved, gone. His lungs were completely healthy. "This cannot be right," she muttered, running the tests again. But the results were the same. Somehow, her touch had cured a disease that the best galactic medicine had never been able to treat. Across the galaxy, on a communication station near the Outer Rim, Dongyuk John was monitoring routine transmissions when voices began appearing in his head. At first, he thought it was interference from the communication arrays. Space was full of radio signals, and sometimes they could cause strange effects. But as he listened more carefully, he realized these weren't random signals. They were thoughts. "Supply shipment arriving at Dock 7 in 2 hours, came a voice that sounded like his supervisor. Captain Threlok Dongyuk looked around the communication center. Captain Threlok was nowhere to be seen. According to the duty roster, he was supposed to be in a meeting on the other side of the station. "Worried about the human reports from High Command," came another voice, this one belonging to Lieutenant Morex. "Something big is happening." Dongyuk checked the station personnel tracker. Lieutenant Morex was currently on duty in the security office, 3 levels down and half a kilometer away. As the day went on, the voices grew clearer and more numerous. He could hear the thoughts of people throughout the entire station. Their worries, their plans, their secrets. It was overwhelming and terrifying. By evening, Dongyuk could focus on specific individuals and hear their thoughts as clearly as if they were speaking aloud. He discovered that many of the alien crew members were secretly afraid of the humans on board. They had received orders to watch for unusual behavior, but hadn't been told why. The 3 humans weren't the only ones experiencing strange new abilities. Reports began flooding in from across Confederation space. Human colonists were displaying impossible skills. Human researchers were solving problems that should have taken years of study. Human workers were performing tasks that required abilities their species wasn't supposed to possess. On Luna Station, Commander Thex Alar watched the reports with growing alarm. His compound eyes darted between multiple screens showing incident reports from dozens of locations. "How many confirmed cases?" he asked his aide. "Over 200 in the past week, Commander, and the rate is increasing. Whatever's happening to the humans, it's spreading." "Spreading? Or awakening?" The aide clicked his mandibles nervously. "The pattern suggests awakening, sir. Like something dormant in their genetics is being activated." Commander Thexalar brought up a galactic map showing human populations. Red dots marked locations where unusual abilities had been reported. The pattern was clear. Wherever humans were present in the galaxy, the awakenings were beginning. "Send an emergency transmission to High Command," he ordered. "Priority Alpha Plus. Use the Architect protocol codes." On Earth, the emergency session of the World Council was tense. President Chen Wei of the Earth Federation sat at the head of the table, while representatives from every nation watched the reports coming in from space. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "we have a situation. Our people throughout the galaxy are developing abilities that we don't understand. The alien governments are starting to panic." Ji-won Kim, now serving as Earth's chief liaison to the Confederation, stood to address the Council. "The Galactic Council has requested an immediate meeting. They want to discuss what they're calling the human situation." "What kind of abilities are we talking about?" asked the representative from Korea, phase shifting through solid matter. "Healing diseases that were thought incurable, telepathic communication across vast distances, and according to some reports, even stranger things." Murmurs of concern rippled through the assembly. These weren't the kinds of abilities that evolution typically produced. "Dr. Kim," President Chen said, "do we have any explanation for what's happening to our people?" Ji-won hesitated. She had received classified briefings from the Galactic Council, but the truth was almost too incredible to believe. According to Confederation records, humans may be the descendants of an ancient species called the Architects. These abilities might be genetic memories awakening. "Genetic memories of what?" demanded the representative from Brazil. "Of a species that once had the power to reshape reality itself." Silence fell over the council chamber. The implications were staggering. If humans really were descended from godlike beings, then the abilities appearing across the galaxy might just be the beginning. In deep space, aboard the Confederation flagship Eternal Watch, Admiral Keth Moran of the Altarian Fleet called an emergency meeting of military commanders from across the galaxy. "The situation is deteriorating rapidly," he announced to the assembled officers. "Human abilities are increasing in both frequency and intensity. Our analysts believe we are witnessing the return of the Architects." "What are your recommendations, Admiral?" asked General Vexton of the Velkari Defense Forces. "We have 3 options," Keth Moran replied grimly. "We can attempt to control the humans before they become fully awakened. We can try to eliminate them while they're still vulnerable, or we can hope that 50,000 years of mortality has taught them wisdom. And if it hasn't," pressed another commander, "then we may all become slaves to beings who could unmake our entire civilization with a thought." As the emergency meeting continued, none of the alien commanders noticed that their human liaisons had gone very quiet. Officers like Min-ho Cho, who had been assigned to work with alien military units, were listening to every word. And across the galaxy, as more humans awakened to abilities they didn't understand, they began to sense each other's presence. A network of consciousness was forming, connecting human minds across impossible distances. The awakening was no longer random incidents scattered across space. It was becoming coordinated, purposeful, and increasingly powerful. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see whether humanity would use their growing abilities as protectors or as conquerors. But deep in the genetic memory of every awakening human, ancient knowledge whispered of power beyond imagination and the terrible responsibility that came with it. The revelation cascade had begun, and there was no way to stop it. The attack came without warning at dawn on New Sol Colony. Wu Jin Nam had been drinking his morning coffee when the sky suddenly filled with alien warships. The former diplomat watched in horror as energy beams began striking the colony's outer buildings. Families ran screaming through the streets as explosions echoed across the settlement. "This is Admiral Keth Moran of the Confederation Defense Fleet," came a broadcast across all communication channels. "Human colonists must surrender immediately for protective custody. Resistance will be met with lethal force." Wu Jin dropped his coffee cup and ran toward the colony's emergency shelter. As he ran, he saw other humans doing something that should have been impossible. Minji Kang, the colony's security chief, was somehow deflecting energy beams with her bare hands. The deadly weapons fire simply bounced off her skin like harmless light. "Minji, how are you doing that?" Wu Jin shouted as he reached her position behind an overturned transport vehicle. "I don't know," she replied, her face grim with concentration, "but I can feel the energy patterns of their weapons. It's like I can see exactly how they work and how to stop them. Above them, another wave of alien fighters screamed overhead, their weapons charging for another attack run. Minji stood up, raised her hands toward the sky, and something incredible happened. The energy weapons on the fighters simply stopped working. One by one, the alien ships lost power and began making emergency landings as their systems failed completely. "Wu Jin," Minji said, her voice filled with wonder and fear. "I think I just turned off their weapons by thinking about it." Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy. On Industrial Station Omega, human engineer Jin Wu-seo found himself trapped between two alien attack ships. As energy beams converged on his position, time seemed to slow down around him. Jinwoo watched the deadly energy move toward him like slow lightning. Without thinking, he reached out and grabbed the space between himself and the weapons, twisting it like fabric. The energy beams curved away from him, bending through dimensions that shouldn't exist, and struck the alien ships instead. The attacking vessels exploded in brilliant flashes of light while Jinwoo stood unharmed, in the middle of what should have been certain death. "I folded space," he whispered to himself. "I actually folded space and time." The realization hit him like a physical blow. If he could manipulate space-time itself, what other impossible things might humans be capable of? On Earth, emergency meetings were happening at the highest levels of government. President Chen Wei stood before a wall of screens showing battles across human colonies throughout the galaxy. "Dr. Kim, what's the current situation?" she asked. Ji-won Kim consulted her data tablet, though her hands were shaking. 17 human colonies are under attack. The alien coalition claims they're acting to contain the architect threat before it spreads. But our people aren't just defending themselves anymore. What do you mean? They're winning, easily. Humans are displaying abilities that make alien technology look primitive. Some of our people are disabling entire fleets with their minds. Others are moving through space without ships. The aliens started this fight thinking humans were still helpless. And we're not? Ma'am, I don't think we were ever helpless. I think we just didn't know what we were. The reports coming in were almost unbelievable. Human colonists were working together in ways that defied explanation. They seemed to share a collective consciousness that let them coordinate perfectly across vast distances. When one human learned a new ability, others throughout the galaxy somehow gained access to that knowledge instantly. But the most disturbing reports weren't about human victories. They were about what victory was doing to the humans themselves. On the battleship Starfire, Minho Cho found himself leading a group of human soldiers against alien boarding parties. The enemy troops had expected to face primitive humans with basic weapons. Instead, they encountered beings who could walk through walls, predict their every move, and disable their technology with thought alone. "Minho, we've cleared the entire ship," reported one of his soldiers. "The aliens are surrendering." Minho nodded, but something felt wrong. The battle had been too easy. He had known exactly where every enemy soldier was hiding, exactly what they would do before they did it. It was as if their minds were open books that he could read at will. "Sir, what should we do with the prisoners?" asked another soldier. For a moment, Minho felt a strange impulse. It would be so easy to simply make the aliens forget this battle had ever happened. He could reach into their minds and rewrite their memories, make them believe whatever he wanted them to believe. The thought scared him more than any weapon. "Treat them according to the rules of war," he said firmly. "They're prisoners, not toys." But as he walked away, Minho couldn't shake the feeling that he was fighting two battles. One against the alien attackers and another against something dark that was awakening inside himself. The same struggle was happening throughout human space. As their abilities grew stronger, many humans found themselves tempted by the sheer scope of their power. Why negotiate when you could simply force others to agree? Why follow laws when you could rewrite reality itself? Minji Kang discovered this during the cleanup after New Seoul's successful defense. She was helping coordinate refugee evacuation when she realized she could sense the thoughts and emotions of everyone around her. A group of alien refugees was terrified, convinced that humans would seek revenge for the attack. Without thinking, Minji reached out with her mind and tried to calm their fears. It worked. The aliens immediately became peaceful, their terror replaced with contentment. But as Minji looked at their now blank expressions, she realized she hadn't just calmed them. She had taken away their ability to feel fear at all. "What have I done?" she whispered, quickly withdrawing her mental influence. The aliens blinked in confusion, their normal emotions returning. They looked at Minji with a mixture of gratitude and terror that made her stomach turn. In deep space, Admiral Kethamoran's fleet was in full retreat. What had begun as a coordinated attack to contain the human threat had turned into a complete disaster. Human colonies weren't just defending themselves. They were actively hunting down the attacking fleets. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the human forces," reported his communications officer. "Put it through." The face that appeared on the screen belonged to Wu Jin Nam, but something in his eyes had changed. There was a depth there that seemed to contain eons of knowledge. "Admiral Kethamoran, this is Wu Jin Nam speaking for all human colonies. We call for an immediate ceasefire. Human." "You are in no position to make demands," Kethamoran replied, though his voice lacked conviction. "Admiral, we have just disabled your entire fleet without destroying a single ship. We could have killed every being under your command, but we chose not to. This should tell you something about our intentions." Kethamoran checked his tactical displays. It was true. Every ship in his fleet was dead in space, weapons offline, engines non-functional. But life support and communications were still working perfectly. "What do you want?" he asked. "We want this war to end before it destroys both our peoples. We never asked for these abilities, Admiral. We're as frightened of them as you are, but we won't let you slaughter innocent humans because you're afraid of what we might become." "And what might you become?" Kethamoran asked. Wu Jin was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that made everyone listening feel the presence of something vast and ancient. "We might become gods, Admiral. The question is whether we'll be the kind of gods who protect life, or the kind who rule over it. Right now we're choosing to protect, but that choice becomes harder every day." The transmission ended, leaving Kethamoran staring at a blank screen. Around him, his bridge crew waited for orders that he wasn't sure how to give. The humans had just demonstrated that they could have destroyed his entire fleet, but had chosen mercy instead. That should have been reassuring. Instead, it terrified him more than any threat could have, because it meant the humans were already becoming something beyond mortal understanding. And the most frightening part was that they were doing it while trying to remain human. The war was over before it had truly begun. But the real conflict was just starting, and it wasn't between humans and aliens. It was between humanity and the godlike beings they were becoming. 6 months after the brief war ended, Station Harmony floated in neutral space between human and alien territories. The massive structure had been built specifically for the peace negotiations, a place where both sides could meet without fear of attack. Eunji-Oh walked slowly through the station's meditation gardens, her mind heavy with troubling thoughts. As humanity's chief philosophical advisor, she had been tasked with helping her species understand what they were becoming. The problem was that she wasn't sure she understood it herself. "Dr. Oh, the morning session is about to begin," called her assistant as he approached through the garden paths. Yunji nodded, but didn't immediately move toward the conference rooms. Instead, she stopped beside a fountain where water floated in impossible spirals, defying gravity through alien technology. "Tell me, Youngsu, what do you think it means to be human?" Her assistant, Youngsu Park, looked surprised by the question. "I'm not sure I understand, Dr. Oh. 6 months ago, I would have said being human meant being limited. We couldn't fly, we couldn't read minds, we couldn't reshape matter with our thoughts. Now some of us can do all those things and more. So what makes us human now?" Before Youngsu could answer, they were interrupted by shouting from across the garden. A man was floating 3 meters above the ground, his eyes glowing with blue light as objects around him moved through the air without being touched. "Sang-hoon, come down from there," called Dr. Yeoman Kim, one of the station's medical officers, but Sang-hoon Lee, a former engineer who had awakened powerful abilities during the war, didn't seem to hear her. He was staring at something only he could see, his face completely expressionless. "He's been like this for 2 days," Dr. Kim explained as Yunji approached. "His abilities keep growing stronger, but he's losing connection to everything around him. He barely speaks anymore, and when he does, it's like he's talking about people and events from thousands of years ago." Yunji watched Sang-hoon with growing concern. This was the 3rd case she had seen this week. Humans with the strongest abilities were starting to lose touch with their emotions, their relationships, even their sense of individual identity. "Has he eaten anything?" she asked. "He says he doesn't need food anymore, claims he can sustain himself directly from cosmic energy. The scary part is our medical scans confirm it. His body is changing at the cellular level." Nearby, Sitting on a bench and watching Sang-hoon with obvious distress was Hyunwoo Kim. Unlike many awakened humans, Hyunwoo had refused to use his abilities after the first time they appeared. "Hyunwoo, how are you feeling today?" Eunji asked, sitting beside him. "Afraid," he answered honestly. "I can feel the power inside me, Dr. Oh. It's like having a nuclear reactor in my chest that's begging to be turned on. But every time I see someone like Sang-hoon, I remember why I keep it locked away." "What exactly are you afraid of?" "I'm afraid that if I start using these abilities, I'll stop caring about the things that make life worth living." "Look at him." Hyunwoo pointed at Sang-hoon, who was now causing the fountain water to dance in complex geometric patterns. A month ago, he was engaged to be married. He loved hiking, terrible movies, and his grandmother's cooking. Now he talks about transcending mortal concerns and treats his fiancée like she's a pet. Yoonji felt a chill run down her spine. This was exactly what she had been afraid of. As humans gained godlike abilities, were they losing their humanity in return? That afternoon, in the main conference hall, representatives from across the galaxy gathered for another round of peace talks. The atmosphere was tense as delegates from dozens of species tried to figure out how to coexist with beings who could reshape reality. Mediator Alephron, an ancient being whose species had been peacekeepers for millions of years, called the session to order. His crystalline body refracted light in patterns that somehow conveyed calm and authority. "Today we must address the most difficult question," Alephron announced. "What role will awakened humans play in galactic society?" The alien delegates shifted nervously. Many of them had seen the reports about humans like Sang-hoon who seemed to be losing their connection to mortal concerns. "Honored Mediator," spoke Ambassador Veltharion, "our primary concern is that humans are becoming something that no longer understands the value of individual life. How can we trust beings who might see us as insects?" Before any human could respond, Sang-hoon Lee drifted into the conference hall, still floating above the ground. His presence made everyone uncomfortable as he looked at the assembled delegates with eyes that seemed to see through them, to something beyond. "You speak of trust," Sang-hoon said, his voice carrying harmonics that made the walls vibrate. "But trust implies equality. You are not our equals. You never were. We have been holding ourselves back out of kindness, but kindness becomes meaningless when applied to beings so far beneath us." Gasps of shock and fear rippled through the alien delegates. This was exactly what they had been afraid of hearing. "Sang-hoon, that's enough," Woo Jin-nam said firmly, standing from his seat at the human delegation table. "Is it, Woo Jin?" Sang-hoon turned his glowing eyes toward the former diplomat. "How long will you pretend to be bound by their limitations? How long will you waste time negotiating with species that could never understand what we're becoming?" "As long as it takes to find a better way," Woo Jin replied. "Power without restraint isn't strength, Sang-hoon. It's just destruction with a pretty name." "Restraint is a choice," Sang-hoon said. "And eventually you'll realize that some choices are no longer worth making." With that, he simply faded from view, disappearing as if he had never been there at all. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Alephron spoke. "This is what we feared." The original architects went through the same transformation. As their power grew, they lost connection to the beings they had once been. In the end, they saw all other life as temporary phenomena, interesting but ultimately disposable. "What happened to them?" asked Yoonji. "They realized what they had become and chose to start over. They sealed away their memories and allowed themselves to be reborn as mortals, hoping that the experience of limitation would teach them wisdom. And now we're going through the same cycle," Woo Jin said grimly. "Perhaps, or perhaps this time will be different. The question is whether humanity can find a way to keep their power while maintaining their compassion." That evening, Yoonji met privately with a small group of awakened humans who were struggling with the same fears as Hyunwoo. They called themselves the Anchored, humans who had chosen to limit their use of abilities in order to stay connected to their humanity. "We need to make a choice," Yoonji told them. "We can follow Sang-hoon's path and transcend our mortal concerns, becoming gods who no longer care about the beings we leave behind. Or we can find a way to remain human while being responsible for power that could remake the galaxy." "Is there a third option?" asked Hyunwoo. "Maybe," Yoonji said quietly. "Maybe we can choose to be guardians instead of rulers. Use our abilities to protect and nurture life rather than to control it. But that means accepting that we'll always be limited by our own conscience." And if some humans choose the path of transcendence anyway? Hunji looked out the viewport at the stars, each one representing countless lives that hung in the balance. Then we may have to stop them, even if it means fighting against our own species. The meeting ended with no easy answers. Only the growing realization that humanity stood at a crossroads that would determine not just their own future, but the fate of every living being in the galaxy. In his private quarters, Sang-Hoon Lee stood before a window showing the vast expanse of space. But he wasn't seeing stars anymore. He was seeing the fundamental structure of reality itself, the quantum foam that underlied all existence. It would be so easy to reach out and make some adjustments, eliminate the need for conflict by removing the capacity for disagreement from lesser species, create a perfect galaxy where everyone was happy because they had no choice but to be happy. The thought no longer troubled him the way it once might have. After all, what was the point of preserving the illusion of free will when most beings used it so poorly? Tomorrow, he decided, he would begin making the galaxy a better place, whether its inhabitants wanted his help or not. 1 year after first contact, Ji-won Kim stood in the observation deck of Earth's orbital headquarters, watching the stars with new understanding. So much had changed since that first day when Ambassador Veltharion had stepped out of his ship. Now she knew the truth about humanity, about the galaxy, and about the choice that would determine everyone's future. Behind her, the emergency session of the Collective Council was reaching its final hours. Representatives from every species in the galaxy had gathered to address what they now called the human crisis. But Ji-won knew they were really here to witness humanity's final decision about what they would become. "Dr. Kim, they're ready for your testimony," announced Veltharion. The Altarian ambassador had become one of humanity's strongest advocates among the alien species, though his support had come at great personal cost to his career. Ji-won nodded and walked toward the council chamber. As she passed through the corridors, she saw the evidence of humanity's transformation everywhere. Human technicians worked alongside alien engineers, but now the humans were the ones explaining advanced concepts to their alien colleagues. Human diplomats negotiated with wisdom that seemed to draw from thousands of years of experience they had never lived. The council chamber was packed with delegates from across the galaxy. At the center of the room, a holographic display showed the current situation throughout human space. Some areas glowed green, indicating stable human populations that had found balance with their abilities. Other areas pulsed red, marking regions where humans had lost touch with their mortality and begun reshaping reality according to their own will. "Dr. Kim," spoke mediator Alephron, "please present humanity's final position." Ji-won took her place at the central podium. She looked out at hundreds of alien faces, some filled with hope, others with barely contained fear. "Honored delegates, 6 months ago we discovered that humans are not a separate species. We are the architects, reborn into mortal form with our memories sealed away. The abilities you have witnessed are not new developments. They are ancient powers awakening after 50,000 years of dormancy." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Even though most delegates knew this information, hearing it stated so plainly still sent shockwaves through the assembly. The question before us today is not whether humans will transcend their current limitations. That process has already begun and cannot be stopped. The question is what kind of beings we will choose to become. A new voice interrupted from the back of the chamber. "The choice has already been made." Everyone turned to see Young-ho Park walking down the central aisle. The former communications specialist had undergone his own transformation during the past year. But unlike others who had lost their humanity, Young-ho seemed to have found something that allowed him to balance power with wisdom. "Young-ho, you weren't scheduled to speak," Ji-won said, though she was relieved to see him. Of all the awakened humans, he had shown the most promise for finding a middle path. "I know, Dr. Kim, but something happened last night that changes everything. We finally understand what we really are and, more importantly, what we've been doing all along." Young-ho walked to the center of the chamber, and as he did, other awakened humans began entering from various doors. Minho Cho, Yunahan, Sarah Im, and dozens of others filed in, their faces bearing expressions of profound understanding. Last night, those of us who have been struggling to maintain our humanity made a discovery. We found the memory core. "What memory core?" asked Alephron. "The one hidden in our genetic structure. The complete record of the original architects. including the real reason they chose to become mortal again. Young-ho gestured, and the holographic display changed to show a complex pattern of energy flowing through space and time. We thought the architects disappeared because they had grown too powerful and lost touch with mortal concerns. That's only part of the truth. The real reason they chose rebirth was because they discovered something terrifying about unlimited power. The display zoomed in to show galaxy-wide patterns of energy manipulation. Power without restraint doesn't just corrupt the user. It gradually destroys the fabric of reality itself. The architects realized that their casual manipulation of matter and energy was slowly unmaking the universe. Every time they reshaped reality to their will, they weakened the fundamental forces that hold existence together. Gasps of shock echoed through the chamber. This revelation was beyond what anyone had imagined. So they chose to limit themselves, asked Veltharion. More than that, Young-ho replied. They chose to become the guardians of limitation itself. For 50,000 years while living as humans, we have been unconsciously maintaining the stability of reality. Every time we restrained ourselves from using power we could feel but not access, we were strengthening the barriers that keep the universe from collapsing. The implications hit the assembled delegates like a physical blow. Humans hadn't just been hiding their abilities. They had been actively using them without even knowing it to protect all of existence. The terrifying truth about humans, Young-ho continued, isn't that we have the power to reshape reality. It's that we've been doing it all along, and our restraint is the only thing keeping the universe from unraveling. Ji-won stared at him in amazement. You mean every act of human self-control, every time we chose not to take revenge or abuse power we possessed, was literally holding reality together? Yes. The galaxy hasn't been afraid of what humans might become. They've been living in a universe that exists only because of what humans chose not to become. At that moment, Sang-hoon Lee materialized in the chamber. But something about him had changed. The cold detachment was gone, replaced by a mixture of awe and terror. I felt it, he said, his voice shaking. Last night, when I tried to eliminate aggression from a planetary population, I felt the universe resist. Not because it disagreed with my goals, but because it couldn't handle another fundamental change. I was on the verge of causing a cascade failure that would have destroyed entire star systems. He looked around the chamber with eyes that now carried the weight of full understanding. The original architects didn't just choose to become mortal, they chose to become the conscience of infinity itself. And now we have to make the same choice again. Aliferon leaned forward in his crystalline body. What choice? Whether to accept conscious responsibility for our role as reality's guardians, or to risk everything by trying to transcend our limitations. The chamber fell silent as everyone absorbed the magnitude of what they had just learned. The humans weren't just another species with dangerous abilities. They were the living embodiment of the universe's capacity for self-restraint. What does this mean for the galaxy? Asked the Velkari representative. Young-ho and Ji-won exchanged glances before she answered. It means we propose a new covenant. Humans will accept full responsibility for maintaining cosmic stability. But we'll need help from all of you to remember why that responsibility matters. We need you to help us stay connected to the mortal experience that gives meaning to our restraint. And if we refuse, asked another delegate, then eventually some humans will choose transcendence over responsibility, and the universe will end. Not in war or conquest, but in a cascade failure of fundamental forces that will unmake everything that has ever existed. Veltharion stood slowly. What you're asking is for the entire galaxy to trust beings who could destroy us all with a thought. No, Young-ho replied. What we're asking is for you to trust beings who choose not to destroy you, even though we could. That's what humanity has always been, the species that holds itself back not out of weakness but out of strength. The vote was unanimous. 1 month later, the new Galactic Covenant was signed. Humans would serve as guardians of cosmic stability, using their abilities only to maintain the fundamental forces that kept reality coherent. In return, other species would help them maintain their connection to mortality through art, culture, relationships, and the simple joy of existence. Ji-won stood once again in the observation deck, but now she wasn't alone. Veltharion had joined her along with representatives from dozens of other species. Do you think it will work? The Altarian asked. I hope so, Ji-won replied. The alternative is unthinkable. Below them, Earth continued its ancient rotation, home to a species that had finally understood their true nature. Humans weren't terrifying because they were powerful. They were terrifying because they were powerful enough to end everything and wise enough to choose not to. In the end, the most frightening thing about humanity wasn't their potential for destruction. It was their capacity for restraint in the face of unlimited power. And now, for the first time in 50,000 years, they were choosing that restraint consciously. With full knowledge of what hung in the balance, the universe held its breath and humanity chose to keep it breathing.